Today's episode is brought to you by Standout Nutrition, where they pride themselves in creating some of the most delicious and healthy smoothies and teas. Whether it's a post-workout protein-rich smoothie, a healthy breakfast, lunch, or anytime snack, they have what you need. Mention Model Mindset Fitness and Coaching to receive $1 off. Welcome to this week's episode. Now, this episode is going to be about a powerful quote that I saw from the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius. And the quote that he said is, "The whole universe is change, and life itself is but what you deem it." He's essentially saying that everything in the universe is constantly changing, and that our perception of life, our lived experience, is entirely shaped by our own perspective and interpretation of events. Meaning, we have the power to choose how we view our life and its circumstances, rather than being passively defined by them. So, John, we know change is a part of life, but how can we control our response to them?
Oh man, this is a good
Deep.
topic, man.
It's deep. It's a
deep.
great
It is
topic.
deep. It's a good topic. It's fun, dude. I love talking about this stuff sometimes because it gives us a good time and a good perspective to really get a little more deep than we usually may have these conversations with our friends and family. So, but to answer your question, man, I think we can control our responses by limiting the emotional reaction off the jump. I think so much of the hardships that people encounter when it comes to change is they are focused solely on their emotional standing with what the change is.
Yeah.
And that goes with change, that goes with anything, right? Our natural reaction a lot of times for any issues that are going on in our lives or any events that are going on in our lives is to react emotionally. It's the first thing you identify with. That it's the first thing your brain identifies with is what emotions you are feeling in that moment based off of what was just happening or said or whatever. So right away we go to emotions. But as you and I know, and many of our listeners know, if you're responding emotionally to change, a lot of times it will be a negative reaction because your emotions will be fear of the unknown. It will be like those types of emotions, I think, will be coming first before oh wait, this could be a good thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of where I believe maybe we can better control our response to change is by taking a step back emotionally and maybe coming to the table more rationally.
Yeah, and you know what too about emotions is I actually was just having a conversation with a friend of mine, and he was saying now he's been in, I want to say, sales for quite some time,
Okay.
and he has a client that he's been working with for quite some years, and he said, out of the blue, he said, this client has been having issues. It's nothing that I did, but they were very unhappy with me last week, and he goes, I really took it to heart. And I said, well, did you take a step back about the situation to understand, okay, was there anything that I could have done differently? Did you look at what you can control? Because in that moment, he started to doubt himself. Like, was he really good at his job? In all actuality, I said to him, well, what if that person that is like your point of contact is having a bad day? Or maybe they're receiving stress from their higher up and it's just coming at you. It may not be a direct correlation to you. It could be more of they're having a bad day and they just happen to take it out on you.
Right.
And I think a lot of times people will do that where they will react emotionally rather than having that self-awareness. And I think that's, again, that comes with growth, having that self-experience or that self-awareness to say, let me take a step back. Let me really dive into this experience to say, okay, what's really going on here?
Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure. I think it goes back to a lot of what we talked about in the past too, man, where I think we feel like everything that's happening around us is the focal point is us,
Yeah.
right? The people, like the energy, the environment, everything. It's all because of us. We're the focal point of everything and everyone around us. But in reality, that's not the case. In reality, the focal point of everyone else's lives is generally themselves, right? You're
Right.
focusing on yourself throughout your day. You're navigating, for the most part, right? Obviously, you're taking care of other people here and there, but a lot of times you're just navigating your own world, right?
Yeah.
So when people react like you said, for example, the one you just gave there, where it's like either someone's just having a bad day, maybe you don't know what's happening with their boss or whatever, right? It's not about you. A lot of times, and that goes with the change now. The change isn't about you. The change is about the environmental circumstance that you're going to be in moving forward, right? Whether with it's people or places or things, but it's not solely about you. And man, it's hard because that's where you're reactive to yourself first. So if you just remove yourself from that mindset of like, oh, this is happening to me, right? This is happening to me. It's not happening to you. It's just happening, and you're a piece in it. You're a very small piece in the change that's happening. And then I think moving forward, okay, what can I benefit from this change now, right? Remove the
Yeah.
emotion and ask yourself that question. This is change. It seems inevitable. Where can I benefit from this? Where I'm not feeling the emotions I'm feeling now, and I'm feeling maybe a little bit more better about the circumstance.
And with that too, you have to explore what is under your control,
Yeah,
right? There's
no
going to
doubt.
be things that are outside of your control.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we focus on things that are outside of our control when you
Mhm.
really can't do anything about that.
No.
But what you can control, and I know we've been focusing on the emotional side of it, you
Yeah.
can control your emotions. You can decide to walk away. Like sometimes if I get an email or a meeting kind of went south, I'll just get up and just remove myself like from the email, kind of shift my focus, if you will. Because again, that allows me to step away. I like to call it a timeout
Hmm.
and just kind of let my thoughts go, and then I'm able to question the thoughts in my mind of, are they valid? But then I go into, okay, what can I control? And of course, I can control my thoughts on the situation. I can control my actions from that, whether or not I can do something to improve the situation, or if I can't, just chalk it up to what it was, right?
Right.
I've said this to you before. If it's not going to matter in 5 years, don't give it 5 minutes.
Mhm.
Too many times we dwell on things that really are not going to matter and that don't have significance in the future.
Right.
And it eats up too much time of our emotional state
Yeah.
that it brings our energy level down. It could ruin our day. And I quoted this before with Deion Sanders. He said, I don't have a bad day. I may have a bad 30 minutes, maybe a bad hour, but I'm not going to have a bad day. And I think that goes with that. When you understand what's in your control, it almost gives you peace to understand, okay, this is what I can do to either remedy this situation or at least maybe make it better.
For sure. And I like that you said the Dion quote again because you read my mind where I was going with this thought was we're not saying you can't have an emotional response. We're not saying you can't feel certain ways about, for example, here change, right? It's a natural part of life, like we said, but how can we control our response to it? We're talking about letting it linger. We're
Yeah.
talking about letting it last. And we understand that as human beings, even human beings who do their best to maintain a maybe a higher level of understanding and mindfulness and those things, but you're still going to have those reactions we're talking about. It's just how long you're letting it sit there for and
Yeah.
how long you're letting it impact you, because that's where the damage happens. The damage doesn't happen so much in the immediate response. As a human being, you're going to have that response. But if you're sitting there and you're going, man, it's 24 hours later, I can't shake this still, that's a problem.
Yeah.
That's where you have to adjust. And that's where you have to ask yourself those questions that we were just talking about here.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. And I want to ask you this out of curiosity.
Okay.
Um, Can you share a life experience where your initial perception of an event was negative, but you managed to shift your perspective?
So I listen, I've told the story before many times, but it's the first thing that comes to mind. It was when you initially reached out because it was something that I was not anticipating at all in the sense of maybe the environment or like the setting that it was going to be in, where it was about developing and having more growth minded um, mindsets for all of us involved in growing our lives. And what I thought it was going to be was just shooting the shit like we always did, and like but it was just like I was very skeptical on it, and I didn't have the foresight to maybe think that things can be more than you're perceiving them to be, right? So when that first meeting with us happened that night, man, like everything changed for me that night. And it can happen that quick. You know what I mean? Like and I said that before too. It happened in 3 hours for me, where I went into something, and I'll never forget this part of it. And I'm not even sure I fully ever spoke of this before. I remember. So that night, guys, we're all sitting around a fire. BG, myself, and our buddy Josh sitting around a fire. And we're all just kind of first getting there, getting settled in, shooting the shit, and we're just talking. We're talking for like 10, 15, 20 minutes, right? And I remember we were on the topic of ghosts. How we got there, I don't know. We were on the topic of ghosts. And we were talking about how there was a party at your parents' house, this is years ago, right? And all this stuff was going on at the house, all this like spiritual stuff, and like the state everybody was in. And like the conversation was just becoming nonsense between the three of us, just reminiscing like this old BS stories. And you just like all of a sudden, like you hit a switch and you shut it down, but like not in like a dick way, but you shut it down like, all right, like let's get into something more like meaningful here. And like you got into it. And then it was like, it took, I don't know, 90 seconds for the mood to completely switch and flip. And like, since that point forward, it's just been full steam ahead. But like, that's how quickly it can happen. I never anticipated that night being what it was, but I can remember every detail of that night. I remember coming home, talking to Danny in the kitchen about it. I remember like what I was feeling the next day, everything. So like
What were you feeling the next day?
I felt like I already couldn't recognize the person yesterday.
Wow.
I couldn't believe who the person was yesterday. Like, why would I want to continue that way? Why would that person yesterday think that it was okay to be that way today? And that's kind of where everything like started to make more sense. I had more clarity. I had all of that because that change happened, but that change was not what I thought it was going to be. And it was not happening when I thought it was going to happen. So I know that might have been a long-winded answer there, but that's exactly what came to mind when you asked me that question.
Oh, wow. That was great. I love that. I love that. Cause I mean, I remember that night too. And, I was at a point in my life where I was craving growth and I wanted to be around an environment where we wanted more out of life and we could all be motivated by each other. And with you, I remember, dude, you're right, dude. A fire was lit inside you that night, dude. It was crazy. And it was like, as soon as you left that night, you were a new person.
Mm-hmm.
And you haven't looked back, dude. You have not looked back.
No. And it takes the people who are in my life, excuse me, to help that. You know what I mean? Like the support system I have at home, yes, of course. But like we do that. We do what we did that night every week.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like that's like-minded people. That's an environment you create. That's welcoming change in. And that's kind of what we mean, guys, when we're talking about like understanding like what you can take from the event and take from the change. Like you can take whatever you want from it, but if you mold it in a positive light that it benefits you and the people around you, that's the best way that you can take something from an event. an event of change that maybe would have scared you in the past. So, like we said in the beginning here, life is what you deem it to be. Like, goddamn, man, like make it something for you and the people around you.
Yeah. And too, you also raised your standards. And that's huge. I mean, it's when you raise your standards about your life.
Yeah.
And we often talk about setting boundaries of what comes into your life, but also what you're not going to allow. Life is what you deem it, right? If
Yep.
you set high standards for yourself, it's almost like you're not even going to get into these little arguments, or something's not going to trigger you because you have more control over your life, because the standards you have in your life are much, much higher.
Right. And when you talk about standards, man, it's like those standards bleed into everything in your life.
Absolutely.
It's not just one or two things. It's not just your relationships. It's not just maybe the places you're going or the place you work, right? Like your standards overall will change. And I mentioned that word relationships. You understand just how many things you have a relationship with. It's not a person. It's not just a person. It's not just people. You can have relationships with everything in your life. What is your relationship with food, right? What is your relationship with money? What is your relationship with your surroundings, right? You have relationships with everything. And, life's not defined by external events, but how we perceive and interpret those events. And how can we have a better relationship now with our interpretation of events? Like, let's go into that here, right?
Yeah,
Because it's all about how we interpret it. It's all about how everyone perceives it, right? So how can we have a better relationship with our interpretation of all of these events that happen in our life?
And what you're talking about too, it all starts with mindset. Everything
No
we
doubt.
talk about, and this is our business, but also this podcast is called Model Mindset. When you're talking about your relationship with finances, with your significant other, with your body, it all comes to your mindset. And so it's about becoming more aware of your thoughts and your emotions in the moment, help you recognize your immediate reactions. You already talked about the emotional state, but when you can really focus on your mindset and having like power over the thoughts that come into your brain, and you're aware of them, that gives you power, man. That gives you power. And it's in that where you recognize your emotional triggers that helps you cause the strong reactions, right? It could, a lot of times we don't like to look deep into like our emotional triggers. Why am I so charged up about something when it could be so little, and of course, if you start to maybe unpack that or peel those layers back, it could be something deep inside that is maybe worth exploring so that you're better equipped to deal with those triggers. But again, it all comes down, we call it mindfulness, but it all comes down to your mindset.
Yeah, it's self-awareness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. And with that being said, now another thing that you can approach to have maybe a better relationship with all these events is cognitive restructuring. So what do we mean by that, right? It's twofold. We're reframing, but we're also challenging. So we
Yeah.
want you guys to be able to reframe the circumstances that are happening, changing your perspective on an event. So, for example, instead of viewing it as a setback or as a failure, you see it as an opportunity to learn and grow. You may hear that and go, "Okay, well, that's easy, right? Like well, that sounds simple enough. That can't work." It 100% works. You don't do it enough. It is really what it comes down to. You're not doing it consistently. You think if you do it once, things change. No, reframing is maintenance. You have to continuously reframe things in your life in order for it to make a difference, because that changes your thought patterns. That changes your initial reactions. That changes your emotional reactions. When you consistently reframe over and over again in all facets of your life, it will bleed into what we're talking about here specifically. Another thing, again, challenging negative thoughts. You have to reframe and you have to challenge. And so you can't just accept things for what they are, right? Our automatic thoughts lead to negative emotions. By questioning the validity of these thoughts, you can replace them with more rational or positive interpretations of the situation. So, like, listen, man, like, if something's going on in our lives that maybe is making us a little uncomfortable, to put it in layman's terms, what's your first reaction? What do? You back away, right? Like, I'm not dealing with that. I don't want any. No, not today. You know what I mean? What's that?
Yeah.
What's that saying? Not today, Satan. You know what I mean? I'm not doing that today.
Yeah.
So, but in reality, you should be charging forward at those things and challenging all those thoughts that you're having.
Yeah. We talk about it all the time, automatic negative thoughts, right?
Mhm.
The reason why we are optimistic people is because you said it, consistently we reframe, consistently we look at what we learned from things.
Yep.
And that's what it comes down to, is consistently reframing experiences to look at the good. Any negative thoughts that you have, you challenge them and reframe them.
Yep. 1000%.
Now, we often talk about mindfulness practices, but let's kind of reframe it, if you will, to emotional regulation techniques. Now, you and I are huge into breathing exercises. We always talk about the 4-7-8 method, right? What this does is it helps calm your nervous system and reduce your emotional intensity. A breathing exercise is so easy and so quick, yet so effective, but people do not utilize it enough. When we were doing our self-care and when we were speaking in a lot of schools, especially with the teachers, we would always talk about a breathing exercise. And I think we don't use it enough because I don't think we feel it's truly beneficial. But in all actuality, what it does is it's shifting your focus to focus on the breathing. The 4-7-8 method, you're focusing on the breath and the seconds rather than that stress you're going through in that moment, that anxious feeling, overwhelm. You're allowing yourself to shift your focus, which will help calm your body and your mind. It's huge.
It is. What it also does too, man, is it literally changes the chemical makeup in your mind, in your brain. It literally changes it. It shifts the chemical makeup in your brain while doing that breathing practice. So again, like we said before, just because it's simple and may sound easy, like, oh, that's too easy.
Yeah.
Guess what, guys? A lot of times with self-care and personal growth and personal development, it is easy.
Yeah.
We just don't do it enough, like you said. So great call out on that breath work, dude.
I mean, remember when we had JJ on our podcast and he was super nervous. And so I was like, hey, let's just do a real quick breath exercise.
Right.
And he did it. And then what did he say right after that? He's like, wow,
way better.
I feel way better. And he's
and
he crushed it.
He did.
The next two, you and I are huge on. And this one I implemented with my wife quite a few years ago. And it's a timeout. I don't think it's utilized enough. I think, especially when you feel emotions are high, we just continue to try to paint home our perspective when we don't take the time out to allow ourselves to regroup, to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, because that's what would happen when Val and I would say it was a lover's quarrel, but it would be like meeting fire with fire. It wouldn't get resolved. So we agreed that when we would feel our emotions, getting high, we would call a timeout. And when we'd call a timeout, we'd step away for like 15 minutes. That way when we would come back, because it's important to resolve these. You can't just sweep it under the rug. A lot of times we sweep things under the rug. And I'm very proud to say that my wife and I have a very open line of communication so that it's important to feel heard. And if we are in a disagreement, we'll call a timeout because it allows me to, okay, am I not communicating my viewpoint clear enough? But then I'll say, okay, where is she coming from? And that will give me the ability to calm down and really say, okay, I'm seeing it from her lens now. And I'm not taking that into consideration.
Mm-hmm.
And you can use the timeouts at man anytime. You can use them anytime.
Exactly. And I love how you hammered home revisiting it, because when you say timeout, you're not meaning like, all right, let's just stop right now and we'll pick it back up when we feel like we're ready. Because a lot of times you may not feel ready,
Yeah.
but you're maybe in a little bit of a better place to speak rationally.
Yeah.
And that's what the timeout is. And I love how you said like 15 minutes. All right, take a deep breath, like calm down for a minute, come back to it, finish it off. But the point is to have resolution. And a lot of us don't have the resolution. And what does that cause? More issues.
Yeah.
You think it's because you slept on it and you didn't talk about it, and you wake up in the morning and you give a half-hearted "I'm sorry about last night" and keep it moving. Did you really resolve anything?
No,
or are you just coexisting?
In the shower, you're probably thinking about, damn it, I should have said this.
You're like, finishing that argument off.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. When you're still, it's unresolved.
Exactly.
The last one that you and I are big believers on is journaling. Writing down your feelings can help process your emotions. It can help you gain clarity, and of course, express yourself in a non-reactive way.
Sure.
And I mean, the thing too is, with men, how do I want to say this? We like explain. We explain
mansplain.
Mansplain, right? Almost like justifying our events rather than really talking about emotionally how we felt, right?
Yeah.
Well, I was sad or angry because of this, rather than you explain the events. And it's like, we can take time to just write down our feelings. And I think that's what personally journaling did for me, is it really allowed me to gain that emotional intelligence about myself, so that I could improve my communication with my wife so that she would understand where I'm coming from. But I think it also allowed me to better understand people, because everybody has a different way of communicating, especially when it comes to their feelings and emotions. And I feel like I can pick up when people are in an emotional state. I could either uncover a little more, ask a little more questions to kind of help them explain what they're feeling, or kind of just empathize with them, sit in the mud, if you will.
Yeah, it's about creating that environment where they feel like they're, like, I guess you can call it safe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's
But
a good
like,
way to put it.
if you are that environment, like you, right? Not what's around you, but you as the person, I think that's a big leg up.
Yeah.
So,
for sure.
We already talked about here the next, approach we can take here is a problem-solving approach, right? And we talked already about like focusing on what you can control, right?
Right.
Remember that what you can control is solely on you. It's a great starting point. But another thing I love here in this is setting practical goals. Now, you and I, growth-minded guys, love to kind of have that approach to things, because it feels, for us, and for me, I won't speak for you, but it lets me feel like I'm making progress, because it's this journey here is about progress, right? And the journey of life, what I'm saying, right? It's about progress. We all want to progress forward, right? Not many people want to, go backwards, certainly, or even sit still. You want to progress in some way, shape, or form. But again, much like controlling what you can control the goals you're setting. It's a great place to be when you're able to see, set, and achieve goals. And it's important to start small. Make that a habit, make that a behavior change in yourself by setting those small goals. But goddamn, man, it is the best feeling and the best way to have confidence about the life that you are building. Having that approach of like, yes, I'm doing exactly what I want to do. This is going exactly how I envisioned it, because you're just one little step at a time, and it all comes with setting goals.
And what happens with that too, when you have the goals and you're achieving them, is you have a sense of accomplishment, and your confidence goes up too. Because again, if you're achieving those goals that you set, you're proving to yourself that, hey, I'm raising the standard, right? You're keeping
Yep.
the promises you're making to yourself, which will increase your confidence.
Confidence goes a long way.
So this next one I want to talk about, this could get deep, but developing self-compassion and perspective. I don't believe we have self-compassion for ourselves. And what I mean by that is I don't think we're kind to ourselves when we struggle. We hear it all the time, especially, you and I are cut from the same cloth, let's be real, is the words that you say to yourself become true. If you continue to say it and say it and say it, you're going to believe it. So if you're saying, I'm an idiot, you're going to believe you're an idiot when it could just be a mistake, right? Too many of us are harsh. We're our worst critics. We've said this before. Speak to yourself like you're talking to your best friend. Oftentimes, we don't do it enough. And quite honestly, I think if people hear that, they'll just be like, oh, whatever. But it's true. If you want to have shift your perspective on life, if you want to be an optimistic person, you have to be kind to yourself. And understanding, again, not everything is your fault, right? But your response of being kind to yourself and kind to others, man, it's all about self-compassion.
Man, I love how you started that right there, where you're not compassionate to yourself specifically when things aren't going your way. Like, man, that shit's real.
Yeah.
That's real, because you take the opportunity to pounce on yourself when that happens.
Oh yeah.
Hey, why is that our first reaction? Like, is it, like, think about that when you're listening to this. Why is your first reaction to pounce on yourself when things aren't going well and to pile on yourself rather than having self-compassion? That's and every answer to that question will be individualized for sure, but you're going to be able to uncover a lot by asking yourself that question.
Yeah. The next one is empathy for others. Sometimes understanding other people's perspectives can help us respond with patience and understanding rather than frustration. I think, and the biggest quote that I'll say here that resonates with this is listen to understand, not to respond.
Mhm.
Too many of us will listen to respond. And we've learned, especially, you are very good at recognizing body language, and you can pick up on when people are, sad, angry, uncomfortable, and everybody struggles.
Mhm.
Everybody struggles. No one is perfect. No one has a perfect life. Even the people that we feel are the most successful in life, they have struggles too.
Mhm.
And if we could just understand what someone's going through, it'll give us perspective. And I think you can then have an open dialogue where you're actually making them feel heard.
Mhm.
And I think as a society, we don't allow people to feel heard.
100%, man. I agree. With that, because empathy, it doesn't come naturally, I think, for everybody, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's totally fine. I 100% understand that. Um, but I like how at the end of that it says it says that understanding and having the empathy rather than frustration, right? So, because if you are maybe not someone who is the most empathetic, but if you think about it, you also don't want to go to the other end of the spectrum and always be frustrated when maybe a circumstance arises that isn't going your way or going the right way, right? So find that middle ground. And I think that leads us to the next point here, which is acceptance.
Yeah, man, accepting that certain things are outside of control. That can reduce the emotional toll on difficult situations.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about this before. I mean, when you are focusing on things that are outside your control and it's like eating you up,
Mhm.
you know, you and I would just be like, why? We would question that and just be like,
For sure.
well, why are you doing that? Why are you beating up? That's totally
Yeah.
not within your control.
Mhm.
I remember when we were at Timothy Edwards Middle School, we were speaking to the teachers there, and one of the teachers was talking about how she felt very overwhelmed for her daughter who was at college.
Mm.
And it was like she was worried about a future that had not even taken place.
Mhm.
And we were just asking her, like, well, why are you worrying about that? Like, it's clearly taking an emotional toll on you, but
Yeah.
that is clearly outside of your control. This is your
Mhm.
daughter's life. And I
Right.
understand as a parent, you want what's best for your child. But she was painting a picture and overwhelming herself that had not even taken place. And from what she was telling us, her daughter seemed amazing, you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
But you you're beating yourself up, and you could tell emotionally she was just
Mhm.
very overwhelmed and fried by, quite honestly, something that may not even occur.
Right. You're gonna have, I feel like, to learn acceptance in the most challenging points of your life.
Yeah.
And this is firsthand experience, man. Like when my dad died, I and this goes for anybody who lost somebody, you continuously over and over again ask why. Why? Why? You know what I mean? Like my dad was only like 57 when he died. Like he had all these young grandchildren. Like he was getting ready to like retire in the coming years. Like him and my mom were like really just hitting their stride, it seemed like. And it was just like, why, right? Like him and I had a budding great relationship because I think he saw me as a man rather than like just his son. So it was like we had we had all these things ahead of us, but then it was cut short. And so that whole time frame, it was like I need answers to this. I need to know why he died. And I need to know why he died at this point of his life and at this point of our lives. So you search and you search and you search. But the hardest part is you have no avenue for answers. You're asking questions that don't have answers. And you drive yourself crazy with that. And it doesn't have to just be with death, it can be with anything that is of extreme circumstances in your life, right? Like I said, the most troubling times in your life, you're going to have to learn what acceptance is. If you lose your job, maybe you'll never know exactly why, but you're going to have to accept it. And it takes maybe sometimes that really really hard event to really finally understand and get to the point of acceptance. So if you're having a hard time with it and maybe you're not sure like how do I get to acceptance, a lot of time it comes through you have to walk through all that shitty stuff first. And that's totally okay because I think that's what helps you understand just what acceptance means for you. You know what I mean? So like
Yeah.
that's and I didn't want to go like that in such a dark road there, but it
No,
really
no,
is.
I mean,
It's true,
that's
man. Because acceptance is hard, man. Like
yeah.
it's weird. Like even little things now. Like we have a bad meeting, right? And like we'll just spin our wheels for the whole day after that. Why did that meeting go like off the rails on us? And it's like finally we're just like maybe there isn't an answer.
Yeah.
Like we talked about what we could have controlled in that meeting. We felt we controlled what we could have controlled, and it didn't go well. We accept that now, right?
Yeah.
So the acceptance has different levels, but eventually, sometimes with things that could be a little challenging, you're gonna find acceptance.
This is true, man. I love that. I love that. All right. Let's hit up that building emotional resilience, my friend.
For sure. And positive habits. Build your positive habits, people. Regular exercise, a healthy lifestyle, sufficient sleep. We know a lot of you guys need that. Social support, that they all contribute to this emotional resilience, making it easier to cope with life's challenges. It's why Brian and I will always try to incorporate some kind of movement into our programs. It's a piece of that the positive habit building, the positive lifestyle. It's all one thing to us, right? The mind body connection. It's all a work in progress together. So, develop those positive habits, and you're going to have the ability to have some longevity into what life is throwing at you, and you'll be able to see it through a positive lens.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, we demonstrate it firsthand in our program when we move the body, because we demonstrate how the power of that.
No doubt. No doubt. And the last thing here, listen, this is the model mindset, and it's all about growth minded topics. So we are talking about having a growth mindset. Like we talked about maybe 20 minutes ago here, my life changed when I developed a growth mindset. We have people who DM us to this day about their displeasures with where they are and versus where they want to be. And we encourage everybody to understand having a growth mindset oftentimes means you're breaking out of a mold.
Yeah.
What's there for you, what's structured for you, what you've been taught is oftentimes the exact opposite place you need to be as an individual with a growth mindset, because you're taking those barriers off, you're letting your creativity flow, and you're building something for yourself. That's what we mean when we talk about life is what you deem it to be.
Yeah.
Have a growth mindset, color outside the lines, break the barriers you've always been taught, and create something fucking cool for yourself. Because it's the most empowering thing you can possibly do as a human being, in my opinion, is create your life, not follow a mold. And like you and I, man, we talk about it every day of our lives. We are making that mold a different shape every single day. But what are we doing? We're creating it. So have a growth mindset, adopt those beliefs, believe in yourself, and you will accomplish anything.
Yeah. And it all begins with changing your mindset, man.
No doubt.
And this was a powerful episode. We love that we got deep, but this was great. Remember, things will happen in life. All the experiences we go through are the stories we tell ourselves. You all know where to reach us, Model Mindset Fitness Coaching at gmail.com. Visit our website. You can get us in contact there, or even our Instagram. All right, guys, remember, be resilient, and all starts with changing that mindset.